mission now. I'm on a mission now. I'm on a mission now. I'm on a mission now.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the mission. My name's Platon Trakoshis of Lucky Bastards, and today I'm going to tie a fly that I sort of came up with for tigerfish, primarily on the Zambezi and the Okavango systems in southern Africa. The name of the fly is bully beef, which is basically canned corned beef, and the reason I didn't call it that. My friend Andre van Wyk named it bully beef, and it's partly because growing up, when I went fishing with my family and my father, the standard lunch was bully beef, halloumi, cheese, bread, tomatoes, and olives. So I was looking for a meaty name, and bully beef just worked perfectly for it. The main reason I came up with this fly is just more for a variation. I was fishing the Okavango quite regularly, and your standard tigerfish pattern in southern Africa is a klausimino, which is an amazing fly, and it catches most fish. I mean, colors that are favored are like red and black. But I always question the fact that, if you're always fishing a red and black klausimino, it's most likely going to catch the most fish. But the thing that got me is I get a bit bored fishing the same fly. So I was looking for something different, and I was looking to try and imitate the local baitfish species. The way the Okavango and the Zambezi systems work in the tiger fishing season for fly fishing is it's after the rainy season, the river has a lot of flooded waterways where most of the baitfish or the smaller species will breed and will hide away from predators. But as the dry season approaches, those like flat, shallow surrounding areas around the main river start to drain. Once the floodplains start draining, the baitfish in the floodplains get forced into the main river channel, and that creates a frenzy. I mean, there's two things that are associated with it. One is the barbel run, which is basically a local catfish, the sharp-toothed catfish. They start to gather in groups and swim upstream, and as they go upstream, they go into the reeds, into the lily pads, and all the surrounding vegetation on the edges, where these small baitfish that have been forced into the river basically start trying to escape, and these catfish start feasting on them. It's quite an event. It's a massive migration, and if you get it right and you get there at the time, it's a fantastic time for fishing. Along with the catfish going into the reeds, they also flush out all those baitfish. As they try to eat them, the baitfish shoot into the main current, and that's where the big tigerfish are waiting to eat those baitfish. So these patterns that we imitate trying to catch those tigerfish are generally small. I mean, you're catching up to like 15-pound tigerfish, in some places up to 20 pounds, and a small fly is still what you use. Even though out of that season where the baitfish are being forced into the river, you'd fish with bigger flies. But it's less productive in quite a big way. So using klausiminos has worked, obviously. Hooks has been a big thing as well. I'll talk about that now. But what I did is I was thinking, like, what other pattern is there to tie, and what can I try and imitate? One of the baitfish patterns that is most productive and used by live bait fishermen is a fish called the bulldog. It's a small fish. It's got a very strange looking face. It's got a funny little proboscis nose at the bottom. It's quite broad, and it's got a beautiful sort of coppery olive color to it. That's the main baitfish that you will find. But obviously there's a variety. There's a lot of minnows. There's tilapia. There's a wide range. A klausimino doesn't particularly copy a specific baitfish, so I was looking for something to copy the bulldog. The inspiration for the fly, breaking away from the klausimino, was based on a legend and a pioneer in the tiger fishing, fly fishing world, a guy called Malcolm Mankies. He's caught a lot of tigerfish, and he was an inspiration in my early years in tiger fishing. And his big fly that he used was called Malcolm's Rabbit. It was a Zonker strip fly, tied on a long shank hook point down, and the body was made of like a yellowy sort of, I think he used wool. And that was his go-to and most popular and productive fly. So I thought the idea of using Zonker strip, which I love, was a good idea. So I came up with a pattern that I believe imitates the bulldog in a good way, and it's proved to be quite productive. On the first time I actually took it out and had them hanging from my fly rod, there was quite a prolific guy that was on the same at the same lodge, and he didn't believe that bunny worked for tigerfish, he told me. So I felt a bit bleak, but went out and tried them out, and I had great success. In fact, on the last day, I caught, when no one was actually catching anything, I caught 3 big tigers in a row on this fly, and from that day I've obviously tied a wide variation of them. So at the moment I'm tying 2 versions of the fly, and I'm tying them on different hooks. A big game changer or a breakthrough in tiger fishing was the B10S. This is a 2.0, and it's pretty standard for the Zambezi and the Okavango systems. It's got a super sharp hook, and it's got a very thin diameter to the wire. And what is a big thing about tigerfish is that they've got incredibly bony mouths. In, let's call it the old days, when we were using things like SL12s and saltwater hooks, thinking that's what was the right thing, they had a much thicker gauge and they wouldn't penetrate. And there was a theory and a saying that out of 10 tigerfish that you hook, you'll land 1, which is pretty crap going if you ask me. Then the B10Ss came out, and the turnover rate and the hookup rate improved immensely. So for Okavango and Zambezi fish, which are generally not that massive, I mean, up to 20 pounds is a big fish, they're super strong, they're super fast, and they hit you hard. When a tigerfish hits you, you'll know it. I've caught saltwater species, and a tigerfish's first take is hard to beat. I've also been tying them for the Tanzanian systems, which have the bigger tigerfish, the Tanzania version, and those I'm tying on the TMC 600 hook. It's a much bigger hook, thicker, very sharp point, but it's basically for fish over 20 pounds, so you need something strong. I've also tied it as a bigger version, and there's some slight differences to it. I'll explain that. Materials. So you've got the hooks. One thing about this fly, which I've seen people tie it, which I feel is like it defeats the object of it, is they use super big dumbbell eyes. A theory that came up while we were struggling to hook up with fish, that was before the B10S hooks, was that possibly the big dumbbell eyes, which is, the bigger ones, the big dumbbell eyes would get caught in the tigerfish's teeth, and that's why we were losing fish. So I don't know if that's true, but this fly took that into consideration. Also, the bulldog has very small eyes. It's not a big-eyed fly. A big-eyed baitfish. So I tie with quite a small dumbbell. The main body I use for the Zambezi versions. I used to use copper wire. I'm now using tinsel flash coated with UV resin, because UV resin is pretty good these days. And the idea behind it is that copper's a big color for tigerfish. I've been on fishing trips with conventional gear, and if you didn't have a copper spinner, you were in the shit. So I like to put copper in my flies when needed, especially for the bulldog, because if you look at a bulldog, you'll look at photographs, they look pretty brown and dull, but if you look at a live one, they've got a lot of iridescence. There's copper in there, there's a bit of olive, and those sort of colors were important to me. I also like tigerfish have got a tendency to like a little bit of red in lures. If you look at spoons and spinners, they all have this little red tag in them. Obviously it triggers something in them, so I put in like a little gill section. I'm using this F&F jelly brush to make gills and bring in a bit of red into the fly. This one here is the Zambezi version. As you can see, it's pretty small, and these are the tigerfish versions I've been tying for the Tanzania tigerfish. It's a lot longer, bigger, and I'm using a different body. I'm using Blaine Chocolate's Game Changer Chenille, which I think looks quite nice and creates quite a nice profile. So those are the 2 versions that I tie. I'm going to tie the Zambezi one because I think that's the one that's most popular and where most people go fishing. The main difference is just the body, to be honest. If you want durability, what I sometimes do is I'll put in a copper wire wrap around the Zonker as well. But I found that just a good tie at the back and at the front makes it sturdy enough. Tigerfish obliterate flies. Even clausominos, even synthetics. You catch a few, and if you're unlucky and it gets into the teeth, that flies over. So speed of tying is quite an important thing. The Zambezi version with the with the flash body and the UV resin takes a bit longer, and that's why I've started using this brush a bit more commonly. Tigerfish have got super sharp teeth, so we always put in some form of wire. This is an old style version using piano wire with a little swivel and hair wire twists. It works pretty well. One of the problems is once you catch a fish, or even when it gets hit, you get kinks in this wire. There's very good wire at the moment, you know, new designs, new styles of tying wire where you can actually just tie them onto the fly, which helps a lot and works just as well. One thing I like about this thin strand wire, the Zambezi and the Okavango can get very clear at times, and this is a lot thinner and just as strong. So you do need that. Some people believe in fluorocarbon. I tried it. I don't believe in it. It's just too risky losing one of your biggest fish. I mean, thread-wise, I tend to use 140 denier. I'm using Veevus in this case of red. I like red because it's that whole tigerfish thing of a little touch of red is an attracting element of the fly. Okay, so let me just give you a quick rundown of the structure and the reasons why. I mentioned earlier that this is a sort of derivative of Malcolm's rabbit. The differences are obviously the hook, and tigerfish flies, it's great to fish them hook up because you're trying to get it deep and bouncing along the bottom at times, so snagging can be an issue. So the basic design, as I said, there's the hook. In here that you can't see, and I'll show you, is lead, and it's tied in underneath the hook, and this helps with flipping the hook over, hook up, because I'm using small dumbbell eyes. The idea here is to get a certain motion to the fly, whereas your claws minnow will go do your up and down action as you retrieve it. The idea with this fly is because there's weight in the back here, it won't dive so much, it'll actually flare up this beautiful Zonker strip on the back, and it gives it more of a profile as it drops down like this rather than like that. So under there is lead, the red gel on the bottom, and then this is the wound. I mean, here I'm using crystal flash. I prefer the flat flash, and I'll leave a bit sticking out the side because tigers do like flash. In terms of securing it, in this one I've put in a copper rib that has gone through the Zonker, and that makes it much more secure, but it's quite time consuming and you could lose this fly pretty quickly. And then the Zonker strip on top. Obviously there is Solarez on the bottom to make it more secure, and I wrap the head thread with Solarez as well to make it more secure. In the past I used to tie the Zonker strip a bit longer, but I found that it often gets bitten off, so I've kept it quite short, and I've started using the Magnum Zonker, which is just thicker and gives you more of a profile than your standard Zonker. Okay, here I'm using a B10S hook. This is mainly for the Zambezi and Okavango systems for the Veevus tigerfish. I do tie a bigger version for the Tanzanian tigerfish for the Tanzanian rivers on a TMK 600 hook. So I first put down a base of thread. As mentioned earlier, I like red because tigerfish have this tendency to like a bit of red in your fly or in lures. You'll see it in all tigerfish lures. So I put in a good solid base at the bottom, and then I stop about 1/2 centimeter from the front because that's where my dumbbell eyes are going to go in. One thing about tigerfish flies, they have to be durable. So what I'm doing here so that my eye doesn't twist around is I create 2 little mounds, and then I fit the dumbbell in between that. It makes for a very secure fly, or dumbbell sitting. So once I've got that in place, then I use small dumbbell eyes for this fly. Reason being is that it's going to have lead in the bottom, and that's what flips the fly and gives it weight. The bulldog flies that this is imitating, bulldogs have tiny eyes, so it's not an attractive thing. It's a big thing for tigerfish, but for this particular fly I like to use a small dumbbell. Place that in there, it sits nicely and comfortably. Do a couple of wraps to get it in position, and then I'll do normal wraps around the one side, wraps around the outside, and then I do this style of wrap which creates a good way to secure it. You go round and round like this, and then do 3 wraps like that, and then go around the base. And what this does is those wraps that were on top like that are now getting pulled in, and it makes it super strong. Okay, so now you've got a pretty sturdy dumbbell in position there. The next thing I do is the lead, and this is quite important. I normally start from the front, and I take thick, like 1 millimeter lead. It needs to be thick. I'll just cut a strip off for this purpose. And basically what you want to do here is you want to lay this lead down. I do 3 bars normally. Lay it on the top of the hook shank. So I do one on slightly to this side, and I do another piece on that slightly to that side, and it makes a nice little groove to place a piece on top. I'll show you now. So you tie it in at the end, and then what I do is I hold it out at an angle like this so that it sits nicely on the side. And I'll take that all the way to the bend, tie it back, snip this off, and then I put one on the other side. So to show you what that looks like, so this piece will go on the side like this, and the third piece on top. I'll show you when it's done. Same thing, tie in the tip like that, and then this piece now is sitting next to the piece I just tied in, and it creates a nice flat surface with a bit of a ridge in the middle. So I just first get them into position, snip that off, and then this piece goes on top. So you take your thread back to your dumbbells, place that on top like that, and now this is basically fitting in between the two that I've placed on top, or in between the groove, but it still stands out a bit. Yeah, it's making like a triangle of lead, and it's all underneath the hook shank, which makes it super strong, and it gives it a little bit of profile as well. And then you snip that off. I like to make this quite neat. Even though you're going to cover it, you just want that tinsel that you're going to put on top of this to sit nice and comfortably and not have too many kinks and dents in it. So I take it up to there, and then I take it back, and I leave the the thread at the back of the hook shank like that. To strengthen this, what I tend to do is I'll tie in the flash, then I'll put a coat of super glue, and I'll wrap the thread around the super glue just for strength. Everything needs to have strength with a tigerfish fly. So I'll take a few strands, depends on how thick you want it. In this case I've got 5 strands, which should be enough. And what I like to do is straighten these out a bit so we've got sort of some uniform. It doesn't have to be dead straight. And I'm going to use this as a bit of a tail and a bit of a flash tail at the back here. So I'll let it stick out about that much, just so you got some flash in there. I'll tie that in, avoiding these extra strands. You want it to be long because you're going to wrap these strands now around that base. So once it's in position, I'll drop a little bit of super glue on here, and quickly wrap this around. So you want to get something quite uniform, going all the way up to the eyes. And the reason why we're using thick tinsel, or lots of tinsel, is you want it to cover that whole base. Take it all the way there and then all the way back. And what you'll find is you'll have some excess. And I like that excess because it'll add to the tail. So you just go round and round, 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 all the way to the back. Tie it off there, and now you've got an extra little bit of flash here to make it a little bit more flashy, which tigerfish like. There you go. And that'll dance nicely underneath. Again, then you just tie this off at the end with a couple of hitches. Right, now we need to cover this with UV resin to make it strong. That's why I haven't put anything on that thread. I'm using thick Solarez for this. It works like a charm. It's not sticky. You definitely want to avoid sticky stuff because the rabbit Zonker fur just sticks to it like a... And I'll put quite a generous coating on it. Oops, mind that. It's quite tacky at the moment. It'll soften nicely into the fly. It just protects this from those pretty gritty tigerfish teeth. Okay, give it a few turns so it like pans out evenly along the fly. Give it a good bash with your UV torch. And as you can see, it's got this beautiful iridescent sort of coppery color, which if you look at a bulldog in real life, they have this. If you look at a photo, they just look brown, but they're beautiful fish actually. Okay, so once that's solid and we feel that it's working, so then I put in thread just behind the eye here, because we're going to put in this jelly flash now of red. And remember that this hook's swimming this way, so we want the jelly flash on the bottom. You don't need a lot. I mean, you can use other materials. I just like this stuff because it's shiny and it just seems to work. So I just cut a small section of this. And it only needs a couple of wraps. I mean, you're just making gill plates here and adding red because it's cool for tigerfish. So I'll tie that in and then I'll just give it a couple of wraps. 1, 2, and done. Tie that off. Try and get the stuff to go back. Wow, there's still gooiness on here. Where's my okay, and then you trim that little piece off. And I tend to trim the top as well because you don't want too much hanging around on the top, because we're going to place the Zonker strip on top of that. When I've been trying to imitate the bulldogs, they've got like a brownish, grayish, olivish sort of color, and I like this variegated tan version. It works nicely. But what I found is that in dirtier water, purple and black works really well. That's a purple version there. And I also like the variegated stripy version, which did very well for Tudor up in Tanzania. But let's stick with the natural that I liked. So first you've got to measure it out so you know where to cut it. It's going to be tied off just behind the hook eye, and I want about 1 inch behind the back. So I'll cut off a piece. Okay, so what I do is I cut in a little V at the back, so it's got a nice taper to it. Not that it's that important, but it looks better to me. And then you're going to place this so the eye's there, and you've got to get your length right. So you can see there, that's where it's going to go at the back of the hook shank. So I'll measure that out, find the point, and then what I do is I'll push it through the middle on the hook like that, take it out of the vise, pull it down into that position, and then back into the vise. Oops. Like that. So then when you pull it forward, it'll hold like this. Okay, so once you place this, I mean, something that you can do, a lot of concern with Zonker is that it wraps. On the bigger flies with a longer extension, I put in a loop on the bottom like that to help with wrapping. But to be honest, with the Magnum Zonker and not too long a tail, I don't have a problem with that. So we pop that on the back of the hook. I've slid it on down to the bottom, pull it tight forward. I mean, what I like to do is I'll do 2 wraps basically. I'll do one from behind the eye like that to secure it. Pull your thread forward. This is where saliva can be very helpful to get a gap in your Zonker, just to make it nice and tidy and give you a nice gap. Tie it around once, twice, 3 times, and then I'll take it in front of the eye to make the head. And here what I like to do to make the head stand out a little bit more is I'll push all the fluff back and then tie it in so that you've got a bit more bulk in your head. Like that. Just see how that's looking there. Yeah, that's good. And then cut off this excess before tying it off. I cut the corners off as well, because this Zonker is quite thick. So now I've got quite a nice profile there. And then I'll make quite a strong head and cover all the bit of Zonker leather, if you want to call it that. And I build it up so it's a bit of a cone. And then once we've got that, we can tie that off. I'll do a half hitch. And then there we go. So now you've got quite a solid head. This, I'll put super glue on it. And I'll do Solarez head. To make it stronger, I mean, I don't always do this in terms of speed, is putting in a little bit of thread at the back here. To be honest, I don't think it's necessary. Okay, make a gap there, and I use like a hair clip to hold it down. And you can put in a couple of wraps here like this. And that for me is just about durability. And I'll pop in a tiny drop of super glue. I like to use this Quick Bond. It's very runny, but the cap works well. And it comes out quite nicely, and I like to put it on the bobbin first. And then put it in there like that. Just so you don't add too much, because if this sinks into your rabbit zonker, you've had it. Cool. Okay, so once you've got that in there for strength, you can just brush it all back and getting a nice finish to it. I'll then put a drop of super glue on the head, using a bobbin as well. Sorry, it's got quite fluffy. You want to get rid of all this fluff. It soaks nicely into the head. You don't need too much. Let that dry off. And then what I'll do is make a nice UV head. I'll put a blob on there. Be careful to keep the hair out of there, which I haven't done too well with. And once you've got that head in, give it a blast with your UV torch. Okay, once you've got that on, you've got quite a solid bully beef right there.